Good afternoon. That seemed to have done the trick. Hello and welcome, members of the GSD class of 2016, family and friends. It's pretty amazing. Actually, you're all graduating tomorrow, so congratulations. My name is Corey Zengabont, and I'm an alumnus of the GSD, a proud alumnus of the GSD. I graduated with a Master's of Architecture in 2009, and after practicing for a short period in the private sector, I now work as a senior architect and urban designer for the Boston Redevelopment Authority here locally in Boston. I'm here today actually for two reasons. I'm here to introduce Toshiko Mori, your esteemed Class Day speaker, but I'm also here as a representative of the GSD Alumni Council, which is the representative body of our alumni community. As Alumni Council members, we serve as ambassadors for the school and to you. Tomorrow, you will be joining this community. We are a community of 12,500 members all over the world. And we are truly global. We are engaged with all kinds of programs and activities with the school, receptions, professional conferences, and alumni events. It's all to come, but I hope you will remain connected with the GSD, regardless if you're living in the area or beyond. One of the best resources for you as you seek your professional path are other GSD alums. I cannot emphasize that enough. You will find when you go out into your various communities that GSD alums seek out other GSD alums, they hire other GSD alums, so please reach out to other GSD alums. I have been told that the Alumni Relations Office has a gift for you. It looks like this. It's actually a hard drive. Or not a hard drive, a thumb drive. This includes information on ways you can remain connected and what resources you will have access to as alumni. These will be available for you in the lobby following our speaker today, and also tomorrow following the degree ceremony. In my time as a member of the council, I have had the opportunity to deepen my engagement with the school and learn about the programs and activities you are organizing with your fellow students and the broader community. During our recent Alumni Council meetings, I heard from several of you, and we in the Alumni Council were extremely impressed. This year alone, you've organized conferences like Black in Design, the Harvard Real Estate Conference, International Women's Day, and Failure by Design. Our council response is this: don't stop organizing events. We have a saying in the Alumni Council: 2 GSD alum getting together is an alumni event. And some of you actually might wind up getting married. This happens not infrequently, in which case every day is a GSD alumni event. But I'll say, even if you don't get married to a fellow GSD alum, please continue to stay engaged in the larger GSD alumni community. I also want to underscore the importance of giving back to support the school, not just with my time, but in support of the commitment for financial aid that so many of you receive. This is something we commit to as Alumni Council members and try to model as a behavior to our fellow alumni to support the future generations of design leaders like you. Now, moving on to our Class Day speaker, Toshiko Mori. I'm truly honored to welcome her this afternoon. It's particularly meaningful to me because Toshiko was the chair of the architecture department when I arrived here as a student for most of my time here. She's probably the person I actually heard speak the most often, since the responsibility of the architecture chair is to introduce all the guest lectures that come for those evening programs. So I just remember how thoughtful she was with all of her introductions for all those guest lectures. Many of them were her personal friends, many of them were not, but you always took it quite seriously. So I have very vivid memories of Toshiko doing that. That and how often she said materiality. She had recently published her book, so those were the things that sort of stood out in my mind about Toshiko. So just a little bit about her. She is the Robert P. Hubbard Professor in the Practice of Architecture at Harvard Graduate School of Design. And she's the first, hopefully of many, tenured female faculty here. She's also the principal of Toshiko Mori Architects and is the founder of Vision Arc, a think tank promoting global dialogue for a sustainable future, and one of the founders of Paracoustica, a nonprofit that promotes music in underserved communities. One of the things about doing intros is you learn all of these new factoids about people that you had no idea they even did. So who knew? Paracoustica. Her firm's recent work, which is probably what many of you are familiar with, includes the Cambridge headquarters for the Novartis Institutes for Biomedical Research, master plans for Brooklyn Public Library and the Buffalo Botanical Gardens, Thread, a cultural center and artist residence in rural Senegal, and new canopies for the number 7 subway line in Hudson Park and Boulevard in New York City. Her firm projects have been internationally exhibited, and Architectural Digest has listed her amongst their biennial AD in 2014 and 2016. She has lectured all over the world, regularly contributes to international publications such as Japan Architect and Architect and Urbanism. In fact, she just got back from Tokyo. Her work has been published in numerous books and monographs, including Immaterial Ultramaterial, Toshiko Mori Architect, and Cloudline. She has another forthcoming monograph to be published in 2017. She has been honored with countless awards, including numerous AIA awards, awards from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the American Institute of Architects New York Chapter Medal of Honor, and with the 2016 Tau Sigma Delta National Honor Society Gold Medal, where she delivered the keynote address for the ACSA conference in March. She's been elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and sits on the advisory board for the Isamu Noguchi Foundation and Garden Museum. In short, she's got some serious bona fides, has had an amazing career, and you should all join me in giving her a warm welcome. Thank you, Toshiko.
Thank you, Corey, for a wonderful introduction, and thank you, everybody. Congratulations for the class of 2016. I know you can't wait to get out of this school. This is the last thing you want to do is sit in the gun hall and listen to yet another lecture, so I appreciate your patience very much. Today, architecture is more than a building practice. John Haydock, who was my mentor at Cooper Union, and a graduate of GSD in 1953, and later a colleague when I taught there for nearly 12 years before coming to the GSD, said, architecture is a social contract. And he also used to tell us that teaching is a birthright of an architect. No matter what we do, by writing, building, negotiating, curating, drawing, or filming, architecture, we need to communicate our ideas, and in turn, we'll be teaching and educating the community we are associated with. What he also meant was that we do have an obligation, an ethical one, to prepare next generations of architects. The discipline has long practiced this tradition, and a studio teaching structure at the scale of personal interaction and intimacy. By osmosis, our work assimilates and evolves from one generation to another. We are also a community of our own in evolution ourselves. There is an enormous amount of human relationships that take place in our work, which cannot easily be taken over by machines, computers, or robots. You're carrying this important legacy and accumulated knowledge and wisdom, which is the result of thousands of years of history of architecture. Our discipline is ancient. Our work respects and is embedded in its place and time, but our outlook is always for the future. We are a rare discipline in which we have capacity to absorb from our long and rich history, but at the same time, we possess an ability to be able to leap forward in time. One of the reasons I was attracted to study architecture, and I'm sure some of you have the same ideas, and able to not only survive, but enjoy it for the last 40 years, that's a long time, I'm just older but not wiser, is because it is a multifaceted discipline. But to tell the truth, I couldn't make up my mind. I liked art, I liked sciences, I liked math, I liked reading. This architecture, great, I can do everything. There's no project I like, and every client and site is different, even with a similar program. You can teach, you can build, you can take time off to raise a child, go back and do small projects, large projects. You can do whatever you want. Because of it, my practice is in multiple strands in terms of sizes, scales, economy, and in forms of manifestations, building, research, and social equity and community. In between, we design everything that comes our way, and in addition, we began to propose taking on more of a proactive approach. In today's talk, I plan to illustrate some facets of our work and its own evolution over time. So you're just wondering what you're looking at, but that's actually a city of Kobe. That's where I was born and grew up. And I came here, United States, as an immigrant 50 years ago. We didn't have high-rises then. It's one of a large port city. It's a post-World War II, and food was scarce. I didn't have any toys. Grandparents made all our toys. And when Corey mentioned materiality, because I had amazing experience in experiencing scarcity, but never felt deprived and never felt poor. Everybody was equally destroyed, and we didn't have anything. But a few things we had, and how you interpret materiality was very, very important for me as somebody who grew up in these circumstances. The first modern building I have seen as a child is this building, Kenzo Tange's Peace Center in Hiroshima. He built in 1955. When my father bought his car, the first trip he took his family to was to Hiroshima. He fought in the war, and after the war, as a witness of atrocity, vowed to be a pacifist. He wanted his children to remember what the war did to humanity. This particular center, without taking sides, has a motto that we will never forget, we will never make the same mistakes again. And as a child, and looking back at it, as you can see the destroyed dome through the pilotis of Tange's building, it made a very big impression for me that architecture is a constructive work. And using a tragic episode of destruction, and it really looks forward to future, this impression I had. So in a way, it's a bit of an ethical background, and that's the introduction to my modernist work of architecture. And as you know, at the school, we have a Kenzo Tange professor series, and so it's an interesting continuity. I arrived at this place after all this time. And to talk about legacy, because I also talked about importance of history, because as an architect, it's something you carry with. And I always refer back to the legacy as in a conversation with the past masters. And this was for Venice Biennale 2012. I was commissioned by David Chipperfield to install a room called Dialogue in Details. It illustrates the body of work of mine, which has relationship to 5 modernist architects, modernist masters in the United States. Frank Lloyd Wright, Marcel Breuer, Paul Rudolph, and Philip Johnson. And I think that the idea for this particular idea is to express in details where the materiality and tectonic ideas, engineering all merge, and make it into a series of half-size totems so that you can actually have an idea of what experience of spatiality through what I call the totems. When Jeff Kipnis came to this exhibition, he said, Toshiko, this exhibition is about you and 5 dead men. I said, I'm hoping that in future, somebody would do an exhibition with 5 live women. That's my hope. So I will go through some of my dialogue. The first one was Frank Lloyd Wright, and it's a Darwin Martin house in Buffalo, New York, built in 1904, 1906. And this was competition to build a visitor center which can handle a crowd of about 60 people, and only 20 people will go at the same time. As you can see, it's within residential districts, and Buffalo was the 8th largest city in the United States because of Erie Canal. And Darwin Martin, who started the mail order business, was basically Bill Gates of his time. So as you can see, the proportion of house as opposed to others is enormous. And then my project was to insert here a visitor center in parallel to it. And very difficult task because I was in dialogue with Frank Lloyd Wright, who's an amazing master. He was never against building addition to or modifying his structure, except that he had to be the architect. And so at this time, I was really happy that he was already dead, because I wouldn't be here with you. So with a silent dialogue between Frank Lloyd Wright, I played a chess game of opposite. He would do the brick, I would do the glass, and then he would do more dark shaded place. It will be a bright space. It's more open to public, the other one's private. And then also this particular pavilion exposed a Western facade which was never been seen. And also in interpretation of structure, because in Louis Sullivan's office, Frank Lloyd Wright also started to work very closely with structural engineers. And Rayner Barnum also writes about importance of what we call sustainability, the flow of air and engineering of a building. And I worked with Transolar on this particular center so that even though this center doesn't have a LEED certificate, it operates at very little cost, like $500 a month, to reduce, which is equivalent to not being energy efficient, and then being environment and careful about resource usage. And work with structural engineer Bill Baker of SOM Structures to do structures, and it's really supported by 2-inch by 2-inch square columns, which looks like a mullion, so we call them mullions. And this is a center. It looks like a cantilever, but it's pinned down by 2-inch by 2-inch square columns. So in a way, it really simulates the idea of a cantilever of Frank Lloyd Wright, but engineering-wise, it actually shows it a very different way, of a contemporary way of expression at the same time. Paul Rudolph here in Sarasota, Florida. This was done in '56, and it was all wood structure. Again, Paul Rudolph, graduate of GSD here, and he built this house soon after the graduation. So you guys go ahead and build. There are precedents to it. A lot of our graduates have done that. But my task was to build a guest house in addition to this particular compound, and it's built on a sand dune, and it's exposed to flood, and also it's a hurricane zone. So we had to elevate it in a way. This whole exercise is how to transform the modernist legacy with the extreme weather conditions that we are acquiring today. The only reason this Rudolph House still stands is that Sarasota is in a strange area where hurricane just never hit. Because of certain geography, it just hurricane, it either goes to New Orleans, goes to hit the East Coast. So it's about the only way it survived, but it still has to go through a very strict Florida code of raised habitation spaces, and also structural wind conditions, so that this structure had to be made in steel instead of wood, as Rudolph has done. And this site, which is the base site, I could still build on grade, but idea is to how to make it into addition. In this case, very delicate trellis, which connects to main house of Rudolph to this addition. It's a strategy I came up, and also repeatedly is to work with elements of landscape to establish disruption, but also connectivity at the same time as working with those historical structures in making this forward-looking ideas. Marcel Breuer, who also taught here, with Walter Gropius. This is his house in New Canaan, Connecticut. This was 1951, and he lived and worked out of this home for 25 years. And this house was about to be demolished, to be replaced by a McMansion. And my client came, and basically they put a stop work order, this is New Canaan, Connecticut, and bought back the property and asked me to restore, renovate the Marcel Breuer house, and then put an addition to it. And so this was a model of it. And what they realized that the ceiling was really low. It's like 7 feet high. And they had 3 very tall children. They didn't fit. So the idea is to build a bedroom wing, but it's larger than the original house. The task is how, as an architect, work with this larger addition to accommodate this contemporary family, yet preserve the tributes of Marcel Breuer. So the trick for me, in a way, or trick or the strategy or the language, is that the Breuer's stone walls, masonry structures are very unique. He probably was a Mason DNA because he has been able to put together stones in a way you can't question anything. But by the way, if you really look at stonework or brickwork of any other architects, everybody has a different way. You can recognize them by looking at how each architect lays out stone. And Breuer is very, very unique. And then what I did is to give it a weight so that the stone has more monumentality and larger scale than actual size of addition, and materiality of addition is diverse materiality of glass, different degree of translucency, transparency, so that it has more mutable quality to it within this particular area. And also, cantilever, Breuer's cantilever usually droop down. He had wood structure. I was able to use steel, so it would stand up. And looking over to it is a pool house, which also I restored and renovated. So at nighttime, in the layout of it, Breuer's main house, which I also added a clear story to accommodate tall children and introduce more light. And it actually does have bigger presence than a 90-degree addition to it. So in a way, this is how one works through this history in respect of it, but also advancing its legacy to the future so that houses can actually survive into different parts. And going through this is Fripp Johnson's glass house. There's another series is actually glass houses. And I think the fifth architect, which I didn't work next to it, also inspired by is Mies van der Rohe in that particular exhibition. And this particular project I'm showing you now is really interpretation what would be like if one were to build contemporary glass houses. These glass houses, I think that Morrison has an experience because we have Fripp Johnson's glass house here. It's a single glaze, always condensate, too hot in the summer, too cold in winter. It's not very habitable, but I had a client who's keen on really inventing and using technology to make it a glass house of our time. This idea is also based upon Edward Larrabee Barnes, who I worked for, graduate of GSD in 1942, and his idea of Haystack Mountain School, which is a camp. And I worked for him after I graduated from the school. And I was very much attracted to the generosity of his scale and so forth. But actually, I was about to go to interview with Alvar Aalto, but he died on me. So I came back and I said, but I'm glad, that's one of the reasons why my work is probably have stronger tradition of American modernism than a Japanese tradition because I stayed and worked for him. And going back to this particular idea of pavilions, we made basically a camp of glass houses made up of 4 different typology of different glass houses on it. And also, the client had a very interesting idea that I can only live in one space at one time. Why do I need a McMansion? I'm like, I'm all for that idea. That's a great idea. So let's make 4 different spaces. You live in one place, you shut down the other. So this entire pavilions are highly digitally controlled and incredibly efficient in terms of performance of it. And of course, he just has a main house, which he lives with his wife. He shuts down everything else when he wants to entertain. Guest house, he opens up, shuts down. So it's, I have to say, my client is incredibly digitally savvy advertisement agent. He owns a digital advertisement agent, so this actual idea of glass house and control and digital somehow had relationship with each other. Now, just a little bit about the houses I showed, and this is John Haydock wall house, which you have a collection of it down in Loeb Library, is that houses are very interesting for me, and sometimes I think next to master architect's work, it's probably house maybe most difficult problem for architects, because one has to constantly work with how people live, and then what is idea of his or her time is, the work style, evolution of families. And by designing houses, I think you actually can be inventing different future languages and tradition in a very small way. So even if you decide to just do small house addition when you graduate, don't discount it. I think it could be a very important beginning of ideas. And I still keep working on houses because of those challenges. I take it seriously. Next strand of information I show is arts. I started in art school, and I transferred to architecture school. And I apprenticed with Samu Noguchi, and whose foundation I still serve. And he designed furniture, he designed chairs, he designed parks. He had a partnership with Baki Fuller. They were always fighting because Baki was interested in everything artificial, Isamu on everything natural. But he couldn't draw, so I was a draftsman for Isamu Noguchi. But I learned a lot from him. He also had multiple identity, being Scottish, native Indian, Japanese, multiple nationalities, American, Japanese. And he met a lot of resistances and problems, but he kept telling me, continue until you succeed. I said, okay, Isamu. Continue until you succeed. I said, okay. So it's kind of resilience I learned from him. I appreciate very much. And then also continues working with artists, in this case, Anthony Gormley, in the House of Art Consultant. This was upside down. No, okay. So, right, working with many different artists, and this artist happened first and then ended up in a house. So locating different arts and working with Anthony and Richard Long in the back, and Joseph Kossuth on the wall, Ian Santo Espirito, and so forth. So in a way, situating art and working with arts also became an important part of my body of work, because that's how I started it. And this is my client, Sean Kelly, with Anthony Gormley, and he loves to work on architecture. And after the house, he couldn't stop. And I'm working on another house for him, which is art storage, 100 feet long, huge barn, and Anthony Gormley's sculptures there. He can't stop. He wants to keep designing with me, but his son basically stopped it by announcing he's going to get married in there this summer. He just sent out invitations, says, Dad, you have to stop working with Toshiko. I'm getting married. You have to finish the house. So sometimes working with clients, you may have to work with sons and daughters to keep control of them, but it's also a joyful idea. His gallery is here. I also happen to work with it. An inaugural show was Anthony Gormley, and I have to figure out where the weights go so that Anthony can place them, how to figure out the path of moving path of his very heavy structures in some of the shows. And its actually center is a library, a space of knowledge, which also happened to take place in the house at the same time. This is another house, another museum, which is under construction in Rockland, Maine. And I say it because Rockland used to be called Camden by the Sea, Rockland by the Smell, because of seaweed factory. And now it's fast becoming art center. It's a tiny little museum. And Adam Weinberg, who's the director of Whitney, I told Adam Weinberg, this museum can fit in a lobby, but it's a big deal for this particular area. And I took advantage of Northern Light so that this gallery itself can work, the artists can exhibit work without any artificial light most of the time. And it's going to be opened on June 26th. And I'm going up actually this weekend to make sure it's actually going to happen here. And the first show is Alex Katz, and this is Jonathan Brofsky. He's testing on installation this particular gallery space as we go through this. Little bit of interlude so that we just don't build buildings. I've designed fabrics, and I've designed shoes. And these shoes went to collection of Met Costume Institute, and this is for the campaign called Americans for Customary Weight and Measure. It's an anti-metric campaign, which because we want to preserve how we, in this particular country, in Japan, to preserve the measurement depending on scale and human body. So anyone who hates this ancient feat, foreign students, blame me on this one. I also designed a perfume called Anti-Gravity, because I really like this idea of being high in the air, jumping off, and this whole air of getting out of a space, and being an architect, gravity our fate. And just in exercise of perfume, I wanted to have an experience of what it's like to be free of a fate, which is a gravity. So that's actually a desirable thing. It's for accidental perfumer project with different perfuming companies. I would like to talk about two different projects of ours, which is built environment and rest of disciplines. And it's really my research constituents in which I realize that when we really think of built environment, in fact, all the geopolitics, government, education, migration, these areas seems to be part of what we discover and engage in discourse in any case. And as Cory mentioned, I've been going to Davos and World Economic Forum, talking to them, they use the word architecture in politics, economic finances without any responsibility, knowledge of what it really is about. And I realized that in architecture, it's really about knowledge, how we can interconnect elements. And why do we have this particular expertise? It's because how can we process so much complex experiences and information, and how we can collaborate with so many people. We have a very unique tool, which is in 3 dimensions. If you can imagine some even global leaders in isolated silos, if they look at this, they would just see a circle of it. And then if, as an architect, you cut through a section, you see, oh, it contains water, right? And then you see, as an architect, oh, it has a volume. And then, moreover, you can drink from it. It has a function. So this kind of synthetic knowledge is totally missing in global dialogue. So we came up with a way of diagnosing these isolated silos and how to make connectivity. So this is kind of, I can give a whole lecture on this, but it's actually something we've been working with constantly to really making systematic thinking as a part of a dialogue. And one of the things I used is when we had a Toshiko earthquake, we realized that if we really kept electrical and nuclear reactors going and then failed, Tokyo will face biggest blackouts of its history, and then worked with social media to inform them voluntarily to make information available to people so they can start to save electricity. And then in turn, there were 800,000 users, and Tokyo 2011 reduction in electricity consumption came down 20%, which saved it from 30% would be maximum capacity, and 7% was voluntary by citizen participation in such a social media to interconnect the media and information. So this was actually very interesting ideas. And when we're looking at it, diagram regulation, monitoring, and incentives in this case, we realize that the systems in society has to work top down and bottom up. And if you reverse it in disaster, it has to work in both ways. And also something we've been working with is social cohesion, identifying resources and communities, and then having workshops to make the program to work, make things work together. And this kind of research benefited, strangely enough, for science labs, and this was Syracuse project, Syracuse Center for Energy and Environment, in which it was located downtown. It's a research lab collaboration of the Engineering Architecture School, but it also made it clear to the citizens, to inviting them to see the structure inside of it, to see how the whole thing works. The entire thing was a monitoring system. And what was important is actually a federation of 300 participants from academia to corporations. And in a sense, they identified each of the resources and contributed to them. And Syracuse is not the wealthiest city, but it actually is thriving as a center of coordination, startups, and incubator of information. Again, in the most improbable manner, we used a similar idea of social cohesion for the most recent project at Novartis campus in Cambridge, down the streets in Massachusetts Avenue. Master plan was done by Maya Lin, and Maya Lin's project is this one. And our project is this one. Michael van Valkenburg has done landscape design here. And idea is that more recently, scientists are not isolated anymore. They collaborate together. There's a lot of big data they gather together. So in this building, there's vertically connecting social spaces that connects biology and chemistry. And we made analysis of a type of scientists that works there, from most introverts, which are typical scientists, to most extroverts, and what type of spaces they gather together because of a collaboration necessary in new science discovery. And we also made up different types of conference rooms and shapes in that social structure collaboration that can be encouraged, which is based upon constellation of different campuses they own. And that's actually hanging in a lobby as a space, and also made a conference rooms and spaces which become a zone, a blurred zone between lab and social spaces, and you can actually see the spaces through. So this is actually most recent photograph of this particular social spaces. People are not there, and Joseph Kosciusz's neon installation, Charles Darwin's sketches, is actually the artwork you are seeing there, here. So this is interesting because one of the most biggest things they were concerned about is actually the human resources and how scientists as human, not necessarily what they do. But we also did design entire lab systems which were installed not only in Cambridge campus, it went into 5 buildings, and one in Basel, one in Shanghai, to one in Rahul Mehrotra's building, Yang Ho Chang and Dina, Maya Lin in our building, is also from my research vision arc in systematic thinking. And this was amazing because I said, I don't know, I've never done a lab furniture before. And my client said, that's exactly why you have to design it. You have to get rid of preconceptions and start from scratch. So you guys don't be afraid of not knowing anything. Just say you don't know anything, and sometimes it leads you into amazing opportunities going forward. Paraacustica is started as a seminar project at the GSD. And it is an interesting idea because there's a shortage of concert halls, or really not scarcity, there's none in remote areas. And Philip Glass, who was also working with us in seminars, said that, can you and your students come up with a portable concert hall, which I can take to remote communities? So the idea is a global music community portability, and this whole thing happened. And Philip Glass showed us the photograph of him in Athens when they were playing, performing outdoors. It started to rain, people came up with umbrellas. So that became our inspiration, and that's Philip Glass and our students working. And this actually became a nonprofit. We established a nonprofit, and students from that seminar are still participating in it. There are 2 elected student board members out of 5 of us who are very vocal, who are very active working on it. And the prototype we are building is for 300 people. And the idea is that it's made up out of umbrellas about 30 feet diameter. and it can be assembled without using machinery. And it also collects rain when you need it in remote communities. It also has a photovoltaic panel to produce electricity for lights. And also this particular concert hall was a collaboration with Arab Acoustics, so that without speakers, because we are going to be going to remote communities without speakers, that particular one, I will show you a prototype, was tested as performing better than a lot of performing forces, outdoor performing houses with the speakers on. And also another element we have patent, is actually we are going through the patent right now, is that it removes the rain noise, which is very counterproductive when you're having a concert, it starts to rain, you can't hear the music, so that's the complaints about it. So it has a high performance capability, and this is a full prototype testing which has been done, which is built in Kyoto, outside of Kyoto, and all the acoustic testing and erection, everything else can actually be done quite well. And we are proposing projects starting in Tokyo right now, because there's a lack of performing arts center pre-Olympics, and this is, how do you say, more temporary portable structure, so we're working on that. Last part of the project actually starts with my thesis. My thesis was Places of Transaction. And it's about marketplace, drawings, and prototype models. And I was actually probably fearless and clueless enough to propose it to one of the CEO of, at that time, Henry Bendel's, a department store, and presented my thesis. I told her, I did this thesis on marketplace. I think this is a great project. Would you like to build it? Lo and behold, she said yes. So the first prototype was only 165 square feet. It was for Comme des Garçons' first store. And this started my practice. So honestly, I started my practice with my thesis project. It became a series of stores. And those stores are also experimentation on materiality and structures for me. This is for Comme des Garçons shirts project. And also worked for a long time with Issey Miyake as a result. And this is a collaboration with Shiro Kuramata. And later on, Issey Miyake's Please Please. And this has been amazing elements in which I can jump over a little bit, but also because of this, I've been doing what you call this urban intervention project, and some of it, which we are having under construction, is on Mott Street, the funny little vertical building in black, 7 stories, a commercial building in construction now. The idea is that you have a facade which is stone twisted. In New York, you never see buildings face on. And instead, you can see this twist from north and south direction, so that you have this a changing facade depending on light and weather and kind of direction you're viewing it. And the back facade is much more translucent. And that's kind of testing stone that we'll be milling out in Italy going forward. Going back to Issey Miyake, it actually relates to the last part of my project, and so that in a way continuing from my thesis project and encounters, because it's like a series of encounters and some of them are serendipitous. This is a computer woven textiles, and he does a lot of experiments with textiles and weaving. And then I did an exhibition for Museum Modern Art of surface and structure, contemporary textiles in Japan. And I met many of the textile weavers and studied a lot of materials. And then it became a basis of my courses on materiality and also textile tectonics, because weaving can be done in 3 modes of production: manual, like you see, and then machine-made in digital production. There are very few crafts or technique you can translate across those 3 modes of production. And then some of these experiments my students have done shows that in weaving, in textiles, the forces that you can see translate laterally so that you can use less materials. The material textiles can use as a dynamic principal structure. You can use much less elements and material to work on it. And earlier on, we are even looking at African huts to see how they use woven walls to shade, prevent rain to come in, and yet allow the ventilation. There's multiple facilities for very clever use of it. Or looking at the sale of clothes in which carbon fiber, Kevlar, and fiberglass are woven together, in this case, very precise computer analysis to calibrate the direction of wind and surfaces. It resulted in extreme textile exhibition that I helped curate and organize and design at Cooper Hewitt, and felt exhibition, and Sonia Delaunay exhibition there, so a series of them. And last and longest that I'm going to talk about is Joseph and Annie Albers, and Design for Living. This was the first exhibition in which they exhibited Annie Albers textiles and Joseph Albers furniture. In fact, they collaborated together once on doing Harvard dormitory. And also Joseph Albers did teach here, and a lot of our teaching tectonics comes from his method of teaching, and that's going back to Black Mountain School using pebbles and so forth. This also started as a school project because I took students twice to this very remote community in Senegal, near Tambacounda. And but we studied different parts of the village. And a couple years later, they came back and asked us to design a cultural center for them. And I have one of the students from that time staying with me in my office, so we basically did this pro bono work. It's located in a medical facility. It's in a remote community. And the entire project is done by Dr. Mageba to your left. He runs a clinic like this. And because Joseph Albers Foundation has been working in this remote community for the last 20 years, they gained certain type of confidence and respect. And then they built a kindergarten, they built farming school and maternal clinic, where sub-Saharan Africa maternal and infant mortality rate is very high, one of the highest. They reduced to zero on both accounts to stabilize the community. So this is a plan of it. And one of the things we focused on, again, I talked a little bit about value in my speech in the beginning of this talk, is that the community is having a water crisis. It had aquifer, but over the years, aquifer was drying up because of climate change. And they definitely can harvest water using rainwater during a wet season, but there's no system for cistern. So our idea is to use the roof of a building to invent a system to collect rainwater, and using techniques. This is very remote and very poor community, technique of local technique, and working with advanced technology, but using local technique for them so they can actually build it. And quickly going through some of the examples engineers are working with: Brooklyn Children's Library, Roof Pavilion, or the Hudson Yard Park and Boulevard, the most recent subway canopies. And this same engineer, Schreitz Bergman's office, helped us to figure out the structure in this Senegal project here. The similar principle is a grid shell project structure, but in this case was worked out with perimeter beam and compressive circle in the middle, and then simply making into double layer, single layer, really reducing it to a technique built by hand and isolating. This is where red is we have wrapped steel within the thatch roof. And we also made what you call diagram d'assemblage, diagram assembly, because they can't read drawings, so how to do it like a recipe for architects, and series of them was made so that they can be building it and roof is made out of local grass. They are actually weaving it together. And then that's actually local structure, and very simply used it and tweaked it a little bit so that we are able to employ 40 people, local people, to build it. It's familiar technique, they didn't have resistance. And also at times show them Annie Arbor's textile for inspiration. So they made a rather slightly hybrid of vernacular in order to make the roof stronger and thicker. And idea of techniques are incorporated into this. And because of a curvature, the roof not only can shed water easily to maximum harvesting of water, but it also became stronger. And if the storm hits, you can lose grass, but at the same time, structure can remain and people can climb on it and repair it very easily. Again, Annie Arbor's. Another thing is, as I said, it's resource scarce. We found inexpensive or really free tiles, broken tiles from Dakar. And then these were garbage tiles, and inspired by Joseph Arbor's glass paintings in which he built when he was in Bauhaus. He was poor, so he used garbage material, Bauhaus garbage can, to make this particular piece. And they were inspired by it, and they actually did the floors themselves, mosaic floors. I think it's quite beautiful the way they are. And bricks were built locally and dried during a dry season. The boys are carrying them. And also showing them the models of Joseph Arbor's, because he has done numerous amount of brickwork. And they started building it, an example of it. This is an example of a local ventilation technique which incorporated. Also, this is a local vernacular in which there's a small slot and different angle in the brick which prevents sandstorm from going inside, but at the same time provides ventilation. So that's actually an interesting idea of combining Arbor's and local technique, vernacular, and working it together. So this was actually opened last March. And some of you, I gave a lecture with Nicholas Fox-Weaver 2 years ago about this center. And so it's been open more than a year. And then it has received many different types of artists in residence, both local, international. And in the end, the client group is this group of women. And most recently, what was very interesting is that we got donation from a same Japanese company who's helping us build Paracoustica portable concert hall, a very special membrane which cut down 90% of sunlight so they can actually cover it, safely cover their cisterns. It prevents it from evaporation. And these women started cooperative to grow vegetables. This is dry season, and they get enough water there. They use it sparingly, and they were able to grow okra and eggplants. As an architect, I think this is the best photograph I received because they sell this, actually, and women can make money, and in this area, $10 a year gets a kid to go to school, so it's a big deal. It became an income resources. And that's actually became a soccer center and so forth. To conclude that I think your time is right for architects to be more adventurous, more diverse in mode of practice to take advantage of flexible, elastic disciplinary boundaries. The world is progressively filled with complexity and conflict. It is dynamic and shifts through diverse modes of production, expression, and engagements. It's no longer sufficient to stay within a pristine, monolithic architectural practice isolated from the turbulence experienced in the rest of the society. Architectural practice engages with physical artifacts of cities, institutions, and habitations. Before emerging as a building, architecture is a productive and systematic mode of thinking. It identifies problems within a complex organization through the discovery of interconnections. I have been preoccupied with the idea of increasing the need, how to increase the capacity of architecture to respond to complexity and diversity. The answers I came up so far as follows. There are 6 of them, so bear with me. One, prepare to possess multiple identities so that you can have empathy with people, the communities, the clients of different backgrounds and places. Make yourself a member of a team with even footing for all. Two, work in parallel manner, even work on different types of projects simultaneously in order to gain larger territory of work and cultivate and strengthen every project. Three, as a result, the practice will become inclusive, perhaps a bit messy, but it will become a thick soup of creativity that may point you into different directions or outcomes, which means remain open-minded and learn from new circumstances. Four, think of architecture as a practice in civilization, not as a trade or consumer practice of short-term gain. I know parents, it's hard to take. They may not make a lot of money immediately, but in a long time, they will, in terms of respect. Identify those new values and remember our mission is to improve the quality of human life and the environment. Five, be proactive, brave, and courageous and propose what needs to be built, like your thesis projects. Our work also includes creating opportunities for others, but also for ourselves. It's a highly non-prescriptive discipline which allows many different interpretations of what we do. I don't know if we want to tell this to AIA or BSA, but anyway. Six, keep in touch with your classmates. As Corey said, colleagues, teachers, when you enter the school, we were clear to tell you that we educate future leaders of architecture in the school, and you are the leaders of your generation. But leaders cannot work alone, and I want you to remember that GSD is a huge global family beyond the GSD gun-hole wall. And when your exciting adventure starts tomorrow, you will meet many GSD families all over the world, and GSD families will take care of each other and help open doors for you. Lastly, but most importantly, act with grace and dignity equally to everyone so that you gain recognition in your work and respect for who you are. Congratulations, class of 2016. Class is dismissed.